to get to chat with you guys today. I'm here for a slightly different talk than the previous ones that we've done. This one is more about client-facing and mobile development. However, it does have one thing very much in common, and that is that it is about quality, about making sure that we as software engineers, or people tangential to software engineers, are building and providing high-quality experiences to the people who use the software that we provide. Today, that's going to be done, or we're going to be discussing it, using the Firebase system, which is a system provided by Google. So let's quickly start with this question. A question that I forgot to save in my slides, which is, what is Firebase? Many of you may have heard of Firebase before, especially if you've been in the software development world for a while, as a real-time database. And that's kind of where it started. But to really understand what Firebase is today, we need to step back about 12 years ago to the start of Android and iOS. And around 2010, Android and iOS...
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
You need to a little bit louder. I'm
Oh.
not sure it's because that one or because it's...
All right, let's swap. How about now? Am I louder?
Yeah.
Am I just not loud enough? Okay, here we go. We'll try this one. Thank you so much. So starting about 12 years ago, Android and iPhone were really becoming the prominent players in the mobile development world. And they each had their reputations. And at least in the circles that I worked, Android had the reputation of apps that were kind of crashy and slightly lower quality than iPhone apps. I'm sure that this wasn't true in general, but at least in the people that I knew, that was the way that those applications were perceived. It became such a significant reputation that it seems Google began to go out of their way to do things to make development on Android easier to produce high-quality applications. And so one of the first steps that they took in this direction was buying a system called Firebase, which is a real-time database solution that allowed you to have information that was shared in the cloud between different devices simply and in a straightforward way. We'll actually look a little bit more at it in a few minutes. But it didn't stop there. Google also bought a system called Crashlytics. They bought another system that provided an analytics provider. They created some of their own libraries, like performance monitoring. They had a cloud messaging service. Each of these systems kind of stood on their own, but then, sometime around, I think, 2016, 2017, Google began to consolidate their quality tooling under the name of Firebase. So today, when we say Firebase, we're not just speaking about the real-time data store, we're actually talking about a suite of utilities that are designed to improve app quality. So, what do we mean by quality? Well, there we go. What is Firebase? Put the slides out of order, no mistake. Quality means fewer crashes. If you've used Android for a while, you've probably seen this screen before where an application has stopped. It pops up a dialog in front of the user, and that's what we want to see less. It means fewer bugs. So if those of us who are software development are very familiar with bugs, figuring out how bugs occur, how users hit those situations is a constant challenge. Firebase is intended to help us figure that out. It means faster apps. Again, if you've been using Android for a while, if you block the main thread of an Android application, you'll see this dialog that says, your application is not responding. You can either close it or wait for a little bit longer. But, and perhaps most importantly, a high-quality app is an engaging app. It's an app that users enjoy working with, that they come back to, and that meets the needs that they came to your application for. So Firebase helps with each of these areas, and they help them out with 4 main sections. The first one is the build section. These are tools for building up the capabilities of your applications. Many of them are cloud-based tools. For those of you who have used GCP or other consoles like that, you can kind of think of it as like baby's first GCP console. It's really simple, straightforward tools to help users dive into experiences and use the application. So this is things like the RealTime Database that we first associated with Firebase. You can do authentication through this and have Firebase be the manager of your authentication, whereas rather than having a first-party solution that you build yourself or using multiple different OAuth providers, we'll look a little bit at what this looks like in a few minutes. There's cloud storage. for saving files or other content. And then you can also do your hosting through Firebase. There's also a section in here, bringing us back to our talks earlier this morning, for machine learning, where you can host the models that you have created, as well as a little bit of work creating your own models through the Firebase dashboard. We'll look at that again in just a few minutes. So that's the first section. The second section is release and monitor. This is about keeping track of an application that you have that's running in the wild. It's tools for making sure that it's working well. There's Crashlytics, which anytime your application crashes will give you logs and information about what's happening to the users who have crashed. There's performance monitoring, which will tell you things like startup time. There's Test Lab, which has the ability to run your CI tests in the cloud. And then there is app distribution, which is an easy way for you to deliver either Android or iOS applications to your testers or QA team, or even a small beta audience. Let's release and monitor. The third section is analytics. If any of you have used Google Analytics before, it's kind of similar to that piece. You can understand how your app is being used through things like Firebase events. You can create audiences for users. You can have real-time usage monitoring. Again, we'll look at that a little bit soon. And the last section is engage, which drives usage to your application via things like cloud messaging. If you've received a push notification on your Android device, for those of you who use Android, and possibly even on your iOS device, though Apple has their own equivalent for this, it's very possible that it is using Firebase cloud messaging. There's remote configuration. So this is important for any developer who wants to slowly roll out a feature or test a feature in the production environment. Remote configuration allows you to deliver different experiences to some users than others. Not only can you deliver the features in real time, but you can also deliver them to a portion of your audience via Firebase's A/B testing capabilities. And then there's some advertising capabilities in here as well. So at this point, we've kind of covered the basis of what Firebase is. However, it's kind of difficult to understand just looking at a list like this what each of these do. So we could go quickly look at the dashboard together, but it's more fun, it's a real-time dashboard that connects to applications. So I thought, let's go ahead and get an app together for ourselves. For those of you who have Android phones, unfortunately, it does not have an iPhone capability, but if you have an Android phone, if you scan this QR code, it will direct you to a GitHub release for an application that we have put together that has some of the test capabilities. If you are unfortunately on an iPhone, you can either look on the person next to you, or I'll try to present from my device as well. Yeah. And so, we will keep this QR code up in the corner. But yeah, if you have an Android phone, check it out. And by the way, for those of you who have clicked on this QR code, you've actually interacted with one of the first elements of the Firebase system. This QR code will take you to a Firebase deep link, which is a system that they have. So if you scan this code, which, following up on that, you click on the link, it will take you to the GitHub page, but it will also give the Firebase owner, which is in this case myself, statistics about who it is who's clicked on the link. I can adjust the link's destination, we can see how many people have interacted with it, and we'll take a look at that in just a minute. Let's see, let me open up my Slack, and I'm going to join a Google Meet so that I can share my phone as well. Give me just a second. So, for those of you who are not able to see, this is kind of what the app looks like. I'm going to put it down here in this corner. Let's see. I feel like kind of the small scale version of Oprah. Surprise! All of you are getting a free sample app in our talk today. So here we go. We see kind of this introductory Firebase application. And so just because it's the first thing we're interacting with, I'll go in and show you Firebase dynamic links. So you can see here we have the DevFest demo app. We have 12 clicks on this. Unfortunately, this one isn't extremely real time. I hope it's not way too small. I'll talk through everything that's happening here. Yeah, it's not extremely real time, so most of these are from the last time that I gave this talk. But you can come in here and customize this link. You can set it up so that it, let's see, let's go to the edit here. You can set it up so that it goes to any particular destination. So I could come in and, first I can customize the link. I can change it to where, let's say we had to release a hotfix of this application because we discovered that it was accidentally mining Bitcoin or something like that. Just kidding, I'm not mining Bitcoin. The code's there on GitHub if you want to check it out and make sure there's nothing sketchy happening. We could go ahead and switch this to 1.0.2, but we won't do that right now because that link doesn't exist. You can set custom behavior for iPhone. So let's say if we wanted this to be a deep link, if our application was installed on iPhone, we could kind of go ahead and open up the iOS application. Same for Android. We actually have it set up to do that. So if you already have the application installed, it'll open directly into it when you click it. And then, maybe more important, it gives us information about not only how many people have clicked on it, but what did they do when they click on it. For those of you who have used a lot of application monitoring and advertising monitoring systems before, this is kind of like a small version of a branch who does something similar to this. It doesn't have quite as much functionality, but like everything else that we're going to be looking at Firebase today, it is free, which makes it a very excellent tool for startups that are just looking to get off the ground. So that is the link. Let's go ahead and click into build. So within the build section, which we talked about earlier, there are a number of capabilities that I think are worth talking about. The first one is the authenticate section. So you'll notice if you clicked on the, let's see, I'm logged out. If you click on the login button, I've already logged in, so unfortunately I don't think it's going to bring it on my device. But the first time you clicked on it, you should have seen a full screen modal that popped up and listed your authentication providers. All of those are provided with virtually no work on the application itself. They're very, very simple and straightforward. You can actually see them here in kind of a disambiguated way. Firebase allows you to provide authentication with Google and Facebook and Apple, Microsoft, Yahoo, Twitter, GitHub. You can log into your authentication through any of these systems. But in your backend, when you're validating these tokens, you don't need to build a separate validation for each of them. You would just validate against Firebase. And then Firebase would disambiguate it between all of these different providers. So we had an instance a couple years ago where Apple suddenly changed their policies to require any applications that were on iPhone to provide Apple authentication in our production application. And using Firebase, we were able to add Apple authentication as a single update to the Apple application. Just a couple lines of code. We did not need to involve our backend team at all, and any user who authenticated with that token worked the same as any other provider. So if any of you are working on any system with an authentication stack, we found this to be a lifesaver in terms of simplifying our kind of user's authentication experience. So once you've authenticated, if you come into the application, you'll see part one, which is real-time chat. Hey, looks like you guys are in here. Excellent. Perfect. You can come into, so this real-time chat, what it does is it writes to a Firestore database. So I'm going to click into it right now. By the way, if you're looking at Firebase, you'll see two different databases here. There's Firestore and then there's RealTime Database. We're using RealTime Database because it is free. My understanding of the difference is, I haven't used them both extensively, but I believe a RealTime Database essentially gives you one table to work with of kind of a document DB style data store, whereas Firestore database gives you significantly more flexibility, allows you to have multiple tables, but is not free. So it's more scalable, more expensive, as with many things in life. So you can come in here, you can kind of see, here are the messages people have worked with. If, let's say, we came in and wanted to monitor one of these, like somebody said, something test value. I didn't spell value right, so it seems like Firebase has now crashed. This is the fun of real-time testing. So let's see, we'll come in here. And you can see I misspelled value, so you can come in and edit these. Or I can say, I don't know, this isn't really a high-quality message. Let's go ahead and delete it. So there we go, real-time moderation on the fly here. Yeah, dropped it. Very nice. I don't know who that is. It's an anonymous user, but thanks for the testing here in the real-time database. Tabs are spaces. Tough question. Tough question. So this is a real-time database. In addition, Firebase allows you to store files. We don't have any of that in the demo today, unfortunately, but you can store and read files from this. There's hosting as well. This isn't purely app-driven. You can host your website through Firebase, and it does that through a set of CLI tools. And if any of you have used Cloud Functions, they're kind of serverless snippets of code. You can do those directly through Firebase, though if you're a Google project, you probably have GCP that you're doing many of these things with. In our production application at work, we actually have a cloud function that anytime you change your remote config variables, will pick up on that and deliver them straight to every customer as a Firebase notification, so users are always up to date when we change their remote configuration variables. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the section on remote configuration. You have remote config in the build section. It actually shows up in most of these sections because it has impact across the entirety of applications. But you'll also notice that there is a machine learning section in here as well, kind of tying into some of the other talks around here. This is where machine learning can be driven to applications. So machine learning can run on Android or iPhone apps using TensorFlow-like models, and you can do some interactions with them here. That probably is ready to be a couple of additional talks, so we won't go into it in too much detail in this discussion. So that's kind of an overview of the build section. Thank you guys for participating in the real-time chat. Let's have a look for just a minute at the engage section. So the engage section of the application, really quickly, I'm going to go ahead and turn one of the pieces on. I'm going to turn this to enable to true. Let's see. Let's hit enter to save that. If you're in the engage section, you probably just saw a button show up at the bottom. Oh yeah, I see green is already on the run here. Let me talk a little bit about what's happening here. So using remote config, I have delivered a team selection to everybody's device. It defaults to just kind of a sample value, but I've also put up an A/B test. Now, how many of you have done A/B testing in your workplace? A/B testing? We got a few hands. The idea of A/B testing is that you randomly, based on a sample audience, give various people different versions of the experience that you have today. And Firebase has a robust A/B testing solution built into their system. So if we click into this one, what we can see is I've created an A/B test. Purely random is based on the entire audience. You can actually deliver it to a portion of your audience, such as only people in a particular country, only people with a particular version of the app, or only people in specific demographics, or other custom values that you set. In this case, I went ahead and did everybody and assigned people randomly into the red, green, or blue teams. And so when you look at your application, you will see a different color. I see that I'm on the red team, and if I hit this button, it goes into the real-time database that we looked at earlier and increments the value by 1. Looks like the red team is winning. Go red team. Whoever wins will get to experience something when we get to the push notification section in just a few minutes. So this is how you deliver both A/B testing and remote configuration together to adjust the experience of people who are using the application, so that if you have an Android app or an iOS app, or I believe they have a JavaScript capability for this as well, you can change what people are experiencing in real time without very significant costs. Remember, all of the tools that we're looking at today are free. Go Firebase. There's also sections in here for AdMob and authentication. They kind of mix those in together. There's one other piece to this that is cloud messaging. So we talked about how Firebase had the capability to do push notifications. This is where you go ahead and set those up. You can do them via an API if you wanted to do them from your backend services. But let's say your marketing team wanted to go ahead and send a notification. Let's go ahead and try new campaign notifications. Let me go ahead and say thanks for using our app. You will notice that I am using normal text here. Highly recommend, if you're sending push notifications, even if it's a test server, to use normal words and things like that, because you never know when you're going to be the next person who joins, let's see, Airbnb and Samsung and a few others, to accidentally send a text message to production that just says test. Does anybody remember that happened a few years ago? Did anybody get the Airbnb test push notification? Yeah, absolutely. So we'll go ahead and do these. I'll go ahead and send a test message to my device to show you that it can be relatively real time. So you can see at the bottom here, well, it went away pretty quickly. It said, thanks for using our app. It came right away when we sent the notification. It's a little bit slower when you send them at scale, but hopefully many users will see this relatively soon. Let's go ahead, review, and send. Hopefully relatively soon you guys will get a push notification for those of you who have installed the app. Oh, let's see, it looks like green is coming ahead here. So there's one last section that I wanted to talk about really quickly, and that is in regards to ReleaseMonitor. You'll notice when you come to the main screen of our application here that there are two buttons, one that says report a non-fatal problem and one that says crash the app. If you have an Android or iPhone app that's out in production and you want to know if something goes wrong, let's say an exception is thrown in a part of your program, you can go ahead and report a non-fatal to Firebase Crashlytics. So if I click into this section, I can see reports of all the users in the application and how it's going. So let's see, looks like we're having kind of a rough day today. We've seen 30 crashes and 38 non-fatals. So I assume that that's probably many of us in here. I can go ahead and click into it. So let's click into our non-fatal here. This indicates that the application didn't crash, but that something went wrong. So I can come in here and see, here's a stack trace. It kind of says information about where exactly in the application it was thrown. But in addition to that, I can see keys. I can see a little bit of information about the user. I didn't set up any keys for this one. I can see logs. This tells us what the user did before they came in here. So these are the same analytics that we'll look at in just a minute. So in this case, the user voted for blue a fair number of times. Let's see. We're still scrolling down. Oh, yeah, we can see the user authenticated. They have a null provider, which means that they authenticated via the logout button. We can see that we requested auth. We can see that they had some screen views. And then they authenticated, voted a number of times, and then fired a non-fatal. By the way, if we want to know more information about this user, we can go ahead into the data section and say, okay, this is somebody on Android 11, they were using the app in portrait, they were not rooted, and their phone was a OnePlus 7 Pro. Who's on the OnePlus 7? Can you raise your hand? Who's that? Oh, is that you, Matt? Yeah, nice. There we go. So we're looking at your non-fatal today. And hopefully, if this was a real issue, we would have been able to look at the application and use all of that context, the logs leading up to this point, as well as the information about their device to figure out what had happened. We get the same information for crashes as well. In addition, we have the ability to monitor the performance of applications. So I've added Firebase performance monitoring, and you can see that our launch time here is kind of all over the place. Our startup time was slow, and then a little bit faster, and then a little bit slower. In this case, we have a really small sample size of just the group of people in this room, or the people that I tested the talk with that are looking at the numbers here. But hopefully in your production application, it won't be quite so all over the place, but can give you a picture of how your app is performing in the wild. Firebase automatically measures start time, but you can also set custom traces to, say my, render time for like an important rendering or experiences that you think could take a little while. Or network requests are all captured automatically. We're not doing too many network requests in our application, so it doesn't show up too much detail here. Yeah, hopefully this tells us a little bit about how you can use Firebase to track the performance of your application over time. There's one last section that I want to talk about a little bit, and that is the real-time analytics. In the real-time analytics section, you can gather information such as events about what people using your application can use. Probably if any of you have worked at larger companies, you'll have home-built solutions for something like this. The nice thing about coming to a startup, even if you're not able to build your own solution, Firebase will let you have something that will provide those capabilities, once again, for free. So if we click into this events section, let's see. We can see, okay, so we have an app exception here. This is an event that we fired. You can see the number of times it's happened. Color voted, yeah, 41,000. When I gave this talk in my company, they got pretty into it, so it got very competitive. Let's see where the color. Oh my goodness, you guys are competitive too. Red and green are at it. Let's see. You can see message sent. This is in the chat section of the conversation. Or screen view as people navigate throughout. Additionally, if you want to see more information about these users, you can come to the, hold on, it's giving me trouble here, this is fun of live demo. You can hit real time, which will show you a map of where the users are. Now in this case, we're pretty well situated in Seattle. We're not very internationally distributed, but you can see this is in the last 30 minutes, the number of users engaging with the application and how they're engaging with it. As you scroll down here, we haven't built user audiences, but if we did, it would show that you could divide them out that way. And you can see the event count. Of course, color voted is the most exciting event by a significant margin. There's one last piece to analytics that's kind of interesting, which is that you can create user audiences. So let's look at that really quickly. We can come in here and say, let's create a custom audience. Let's say we want to look for users who have voted for the color